far to kick off 2026. And the big question is really about the Meg 7 stocks, the big seven names that we're all familiar with, and how that has translated to this kind of general theme of broadening out. Happy New Year. The S&P hits a record high to kick off the start of the year and the first full week of trading. So very excited to kind of get into what we're watching here as we kick off 2026. I'm Brandon Steele, financial advisor with Mainsail Financial Group here in Bellevue. And our goal is to leave you feeling more empowered after every interaction. And this week, we are kicking off the new year. So talking a little bit about what we're seeing so far. Obviously, it is very new in the new year, and we've had a couple of ups and downs already. But in general, we hit a record high the other day. So, off to a good start so far, and kind of seeing the markets broaden out a little bit, which we'll address in our question of the week. Before we get to that, a couple of things I wanted to mention is, again, be aware this is the first full week of trading in 2026. So we're back to business as usual. Obviously, a couple of holiday days there to wrap up the year between Christmas and New Year's, but we're back to business as usual. On top of that, we had some jobs numbers come out this week. As you know, we come to you on Thursday, so there's going to be a split here where we'll cover a little bit next Thursday as well. But we did get the ADP employment report that came out on Wednesday, shows added about 41,000 jobs. And then we also had job openings come out on Wednesday, which came down to about 7.1 million, which is a pretty big shift here, actually, and important to watch. This is kind of a negative thing on the surface, but at the end of the day, this job openings number is significant. And you may remember from, looking back for years now, this has been a significant discrepancy in terms of job openings and jobs being filled. So something to keep an eye on, especially given the GDP number a couple of weeks ago. Obviously the focus of the Fed on the labor market and inflation. Obviously jobs are going to be critical here as we get into 2026. And then we also had today, we had initial jobless claims come out at 208,000. Nothing really to write home about on this one. A little bit below expectations, I believe, but pretty close to in line. So nothing really to to speak of here necessarily. Before we get to our question of the week, be sure to tune in next week where we will break down the employment report that we get tomorrow on Friday, and then we also get inflation data next week. So very excited to see that first glimpse of inflation here as we start off 2026 and. Again, looking at how the labor market and the inflation side of things are going to play into the Fed's path in the new year. Before we break for the week, though, we have a great question of the week actually came kind of internally as we start talking about 2026 as a group. And it's really about this general theme of basically the markets, what's happening this year so far, again, very early, and this idea of maybe seeing markets broaden out, which we have seen so far to kick off 2026. And the big question is really about the Meg 7 stocks, the big seven names that we're all familiar with, and how that has translated to this kind of general theme of broadening out. And basically where I'm going with all this is that what we've seen so far is the Meg 7 has absolutely underperformed. As we look to last year, there were pockets of good and bad in the Meg 7 as well. So this theme of broadening out, it looks like to start the year very early, looks like continuing so far. As the year progresses, we'll see if that continues to be the trend. But we've been talking about this idea of the markets broadening through last year, and we still think that may be the case into 2026 as well. And so far, we're absolutely seeing that, again, with a lot of companies besides these big seven names really doing well. And again, kind of seeing some of those big seven underperforming in a way. A lot of this has been led, by the way, if it helps, on semiconductors, so kind of on the chip side of things, kind of on the AI play, which has been very interesting to see. Late last year, we saw, huge run-ups in some of these names as well. And this week, certainly significant gains on some of those companies as well. So hopefully that's helpful. Again, very general, broad start to the year. We're only a week in, but we have seen broadening of the markets so far. And, it'll be interesting as time goes on to see if that story continues. Be sure to tune in next week. We'll address the employment report that we get tomorrow. And again, inflation, coming out next week. So perfect kind of, data points to really talk a little bit about what the Fed may be looking at in 2026. In the meantime, have a great upcoming weekend. Enjoy the first full week, or I guess, the first full week of the new year, and we'll see you next Thursday at 3.